Danielle Parker walked into the Pinecrest Bank branch with the air of someone who had learned long ago not to explain herself. The lobby was neat, the kind of sterile modernism that pretended to be welcoming but screamed institutional coldness. Gray walls, chrome fixtures, cheap art attempting warmth. It smelled faintly of pine, scented disinfectant and money. She was dressed in a tailored navy blue suit that hugged her curves with professionalism, not indulgence. Her heels were modest, clean, functional. Her long braids were neatly coiled into a bun, held in place with polished brass pins. Her face, clear, focused, and poised, wore a patient expression, though her dark eyes flicked with subtle fatigue. It had been a day of meetings, some fruitful, some exhausting, all reminders that excellence for women like her was rarely enough. She stepped through the glass doors as the overhead bell chimed, unnoticed by most of the staff inside. A receptionist sat behind the main desk, typing slowly, chewing gum with an idle smacking sound. She had glossy pink nails and wore a bright green cardigan over a floral blouse. Her nameplate read, Sandra. Danielle approached with polite confidence, pulling her phone from her bag to double. Check the time, 3:26 p.m. Her appointment was in 4 minutes. Danielle said warmly. I have a 3:30 appointment with Mr. Darnell about a commercial line of credit. Sandra didn't look up. Her fingers continued their lazy tapping. She let out a breath through her nose, barely suppressing a sigh. You can wait over there, she said, pointing a perfectly manicured finger toward a small waiting area of dull, fabric chairs. Danielle paused for a moment, not out of surprise, but consideration. She had anticipated many things today: traffic delays, negotiation friction, even a last-minute reschedule. But being dismissed so casually, and so early in the interaction, still made her blink. She offered a gentle smile. I think I'll just confirm with Mr. Darnell's assistant that he's available. Now Sandra looked up. Her eyes scanned Danielle briefly. Dark skin, elegant but understated accessories, no name tag or corporate badge to declare importance. Her expression hardened into a tired kind of irritation. He's busy, she said with finality, then returned to her screen as if the matter was closed. Danielle nodded once, slowly, and walked over to the chairs. They were uncomfortable, stiff-backed, the kind of seating designed to remind you that your stay should be brief. A coffee table in the center held wrinkled business magazines from last year and a small card advertising mobile banking services. Danielle crossed one leg over the other and checked her phone. No messages, no cancellations. She sat there and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. During that time, 3 other clients walked in, each white, each greeted warmly by staff, and ushered away within moments. One man in khakis and a polo shirt was led to the private offices within 90 seconds of stepping inside. Danielle kept her expression neutral, her posture straight. She had been here before, not just in the bank, but in this precise emotional territory, the invisible, acidic waiting space where suspicion lived just under civility. At 352, she stood and approached the desk again. Sandra looked up this time, her jaw set. Yes! Hi! Danielle said calmly. It's been 20 minutes since my scheduled appointment. I just wanted to check. Sandra raised a hand. Look, Mom, we don't handle EBT or check cashing this late in the day. Try the branch on Broad Street. There was a silence, quiet but dense. Danielle looked at Sandra, her face unreadable. Then she said, in a voice firm but not angry, I'm here about a business line of credit for Parker Holdings. Sandra laughed, a short, condescending huff. Never heard of it. Danielle blinked once, slowly, then reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She opened her messages and pressed record. Her voice was calm even as it carried weight. Activate Clause 7, Pinecrest West. Immediate. She put the phone away and walked out. Behind her, Sandra watched her go, oblivious to what she had just done. The other staff members behind the counters were busy chatting, scrolling, half listening. None of them recognized her. None of them knew that Parker Holdings wasn't just a name, wasn't just another LLC on a form, but the majority stakeholder in their very branch. Danielle didn't slam doors. She didn't shout. She didn't waste breath. She simply acted. And the clock had already started ticking. The phone rang twice before Vanessa Martin answered it, her tone brisk but respectful. "Yes, Miss Parker," she said, instinctively straightening in her chair, despite being alone in her office on the 32nd floor of Pinecrest Bank's regional headquarters. She knew the tone in Danielle Parker's voice when she meant business. It was low, cold, deliberate, a tone that only surfaced when something had gone profoundly wrong. Vanessa had worked for Danielle for almost 8 years, starting as a junior assistant at Parker Holdings, before becoming her trusted executive aide. She had seen Danielle negotiate multimillion-dollar deals, take companies from bankruptcy to profit, and do it all while barely raising her voice. But today, that calm came wrapped in ice. Danielle's voice cut through the line. Activate Clause 7. Pinecrest West. Immediate termination. The entire team. There was a pause. Vanessa didn't question her. She didn't need to. She had seen it coming, in small ways, over the last few months. Whispers of Danielle's frustration, little sighs during board meetings whenever Pinecrest Bank's inclusivity statistics came up, or when she spoke of her silent hopes that ownership might change culture faster. Danielle hadn't invested in the bank for power. She already had that. She had done it as an experiment, a challenge, a hope that perhaps, given enough influence, she could shape something better from within. "Yes, Mom," Vanessa said. She ended the call, stood up, and moved quickly. Her fingers flew across her keyboard as she accessed the encrypted executive dashboard. Clause 7 wasn't just a termination clause. It was a complete departmental reset authorized in extreme cases, like fraud, corruption, or, as today would prove, institutional failure. It required 3 layers of digital confirmation, voice ID, and Danielle's unique security code. Within 4 minutes, every employee of the Pinecrest West branch received an encrypted alert mandatory meeting, Level 1, effective immediately. Back in the Tesla parked just across from the bank's front entrance, Danielle watched the world she had entered, and now owned, begin to shift. Her coffee was still warm. She hadn't sipped it since making the call. Her eyes tracked the sudden movement. Inside the branch manager, a man named Kenneth Rourke, stepped outside, phone pressed tight to his ear, brow furrowed. His mouth moved fast, his other hand gesturing wildly. She could guess the conversation. "What do you mean we're under audit?" No one told me the owner would visit today." "Is this about the line of credit client?" She watched as one of the tellers, a young man with slicked back hair and too much cologne, peeked out from the blinds, nervous. Another teller, an older woman with stern eyes who had barely looked up earlier when Danielle sat waiting, crossed her arms as she stood in the center of the branch, eyes scanning every door. The mood had turned. Danielle adjusted her mirror. She fixed her lipstick with the precision of someone preparing for war, not chaos. When she stepped out of her car, she didn't slam the door. She locked it with a soft beep, slipped her phone into her jacket, and walked calmly across the parking lot, heels tapping against the concrete in slow, deliberate rhythm. As she entered the building again, a gust of chilled air greeted her. This time, everyone noticed. The hum of low conversation ceased. A woman in the waiting area stood to offer her seat, even though Danielle didn't glance her way. Sandra, the receptionist, had gone pale. Her gum chewing had stopped. Danielle didn't look at her either. Kenneth Rook came forward quickly, forcing a smile. Ms. Parker. Danielle held up a hand. Her expression was calm, but her eyes cut through him. He stopped mid-sentence. Behind him, a short, broad-shouldered man in a blue suit. Pinecrest's regional compliance officer was already entering through the rear side door. Vanessa had done her job quickly. Rourke turned, saw the man, and his face crumbled. Danielle walked past them, straight toward the conference room near the rear of the branch. She didn't need to be shown the way. She had the building's layout memorized. The door was open. She stepped inside. A dozen stunned employees stared at her as she entered. The team had assembled quickly, trying to make sense of the sudden directive. Some were visibly confused. Others, like Sandra, had gone pale. Danielle looked over each of them, her gaze passing like a quiet tide. Then she spoke. "Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Parker. I am the founder and CEO of Parker Holdings. 6 months ago, my company became the primary shareholder in Pinecrest Bank. That makes me, by all relevant definitions, your boss." Murmurs erupted. One man raised a hand but immediately lowered it when she turned her eyes to him. This branch was a test. Danielle continued. A test of whether institutional culture could be changed with ownership. Whether dignity and equality could be mandated from the top down. Whether giving people the benefit of the doubt could fix systemic bias. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Silence followed her words like shadows. "Today, I walked in through your front doors on time, with an appointment. I was dismissed, ignored, and condescended to. 3 of your staff assumed I was here for welfare services. None asked my name. None followed up on my scheduled meeting." She paused. The regional compliance officer stepped forward, opening a folder and pulling out copies of an internal audit report. Vanessa had sent it electronically moments ago. He began distributing them, one by one. The staff didn't reach for them. They were too focused on Danielle. Clause 7 of our operational policy exists for a reason, Danielle said. "You've all triggered it. Effective immediately, your employment with Pinecrest Bank is terminated." Gasps broke the silence. One woman began to sob softly. Roke stepped forward, desperate. "Ms. Parker, please, this is excessive. I had no idea." Danielle raised a hand again, silencing him. "You had no idea who I was. That's true. But the problem isn't that you failed to recognize me. It's that you failed to recognize humanity." Sandra finally stood. "You're ending our careers because of a misunderstanding." Danielle turned to her, slowly. "You assumed I was beneath this institution. You made that assumption because of how I look. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern." The compliance officer stepped forward again. "Your severance packages will be processed within 48 hours. You are instructed to turn in your credentials before leaving the building." Danielle turned and left the room, not looking back. Her heels clicked against the floor like a metronome of finality. She walked through the lobby, where the waiting clients watched the unfolding scene in confusion. When she exited into the sunlit parking lot, she didn't look at the bank again. She didn't need to. Justice had already begun moving. By the end of the day, Vanessa would send press releases to 3 media outlets. A quiet notice would go out to the Financial Regulatory Board confirming staff changes. By the following morning, a viral post would circulate on social media. A photograph of Danielle Parker walking out of Pinecrest West, head high, beneath the caption, "This is what accountability looks like." Danielle sat in her Tesla, finally sipping her coffee. It had gone lukewarm, but it tasted like resolve. Danielle stood outside the bank branch, the early afternoon sun warming her skin, though the fire inside her simmered, just beneath the surface. She took a deep breath and gazed through the glass doors where moments ago she had stood on a chair and told a roomful of stunned faces exactly what they had done wrong. It wasn't just about her. It had never been just about her. This was about every client who had been quietly dismissed, every working mother who had been offered patronizing advice instead of assistance, every immigrant who had been told to come back with more documentation, every young black man who was asked if he really had a job before being allowed to open a checking account. They were all her, and today, finally, they were seen. Inside, the Pinecrest West branch was in chaos. Security moved efficiently, distributing termination envelopes and escorting former employees through a side door. Kenneth Rourke, the now former branch manager, sat hunched over his desk, his head in his hands. He had watched the world change in a span of 30 minutes, and he had no one to blame but himself. There had been warnings. Diversity training he skimmed through, emails from upper management that he ignored. He had always seen the new ownership as symbolic, not structural. Danielle Parker, he had told his assistant, was just a name on the paper, a diversity checkbox so the bank could look good. He hadn't believed she would ever walk into his branch, but she had, and now it was no longer his. The receptionist, Sandra, stood beside her desk like a statue, envelope in hand, jaw clenched. She didn't cry. She was too proud for that. But her stomach churned. In her mind, she replayed the moment Danielle entered, the casual way she had dismissed her, not even bothering to check her name against the appointments. Sandra had judged her, flat out, and now she was paying for it. The client still inside the branch watched with quiet awe. No one was shouting. No one was arguing. The message had been clear, firm, and absolute. A Latina woman in her 40s leaned toward the young man next to her and whispered, "That's the woman they turned away." He nodded. She shook her head slowly. About time someone like her owned the whole building. Back outside, Danielle walked to the curb and looked up at the Pinecrest West sign. For months she had tried to reform the culture with quiet pressure, internal memos, and performance audits. But now she realized some things needed to be broken before they could be rebuilt. She pulled out her phone and called Vanessa. "It's done," she said. Vanessa didn't ask for clarification. She knew. "I've already drafted the statement. Press release is ready to go. I also spoke to our PR lead. We're going to frame this as part of a wider cultural reset." "Good," Danielle said. She hesitated, then added, "We'll need a new team in place fast, and not just anyone, people who understand why this happened. I have a list of regional talent we passed over because they didn't have legacy resumes. Vanessa replied, maybe it's time to reconsider them. Do it. And Vanessa? Yes. Tell them the new team will report directly to me. No buffer. Not this time. Vanessa's voice softened. Understood. Danielle ended the call and took one more look at the building before turning toward her car. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation. By evening, the story broke across social media. The video footage, taken discreetly by a client inside, showed Danielle standing on a chair, her voice clear and steady. The captions came, "Fast CEO fires entire staff for racial profiling. Danielle Parker delivers justice in real time." When the boss walks in, and they think she's nobody, comments poured in, "She's my hero." Finally, someone with power doing the right thing. Imagine how many people were denied dignity by that staff. Danielle didn't read them. She wasn't in this for applause. She was in her study, going over files on local financial programs, reviewing how Penacrest could become not just a bank, but a trusted resource, particularly in neighborhoods that banks had historically ignored. She circled ideas with a red pen's, mobile branches, community outreach programs, mentorship for youth. The next morning, the Pinecrest West branch reopened, not with customers, but with contractors and a team of cultural consultants. The signage came down temporarily. Danielle's team had decided to rename the branch before relaunching. Something meaningful. Something symbolic. She wanted the name to represent a place of welcome, not dismissal. Over the next week, Danielle interviewed every candidate personally. She asked questions no resume could answer. Tell me about a time you saw someone dismissed unfairly. What did you do? What does financial dignity mean to you? How do you handle unconscious bias, yours or someone else's? One candidate, a Black woman in her late 20s named Talia, described how she had once delayed a loan process because she sensed something wasn't right with the documents. But when her manager questioned the applicant's appearance instead, Talia stood her ground and fought for the client. Danielle hired her on the spot. By the third week, a full team had been assembled. Danielle held a closed-door meeting with them before opening day. She stood at the front of the freshly repainted lobby, in front of a mural designed by a local artist, a college of community faces, intertwined with hands passing keys, books, and coins. It was powerful, vibrant, and raw. "You are not just here to approve accounts," Danielle told them. "You're here to restore trust. People will walk in with suspicion. Earn their faith. Show them what banking can be when respect is the baseline." Talia stepped forward. "What should we say to those who ask what happened to the old team?" Danielle smiled faintly. "Tell them the bank changed owners, and the new owner decided it was time the building matched the values printed in its mission statement." Opening day was quiet at first. Then a woman with 3 kids stepped inside and hesitated. Talia rose from the desk and smiled. "Welcome. How can I help you today?" The woman's shoulders relaxed. One by one, people returned. Some said nothing. Some thanked the staff quietly. A few asked if the CEO would ever visit again. Danielle did. Often never announced, always present. Sometimes in a tailored suit, sometimes in jeans and sneakers. But every time, she was greeted with a smile and a, "Good morning, Ms. Parker." The city took notice. Other businesses started re-examining their practices. The story made its way into business ethics courses. But Danielle stayed focused. For her, the goal wasn't attention, it was replication. The model worked. Now, she wanted to build 10 more. And everywhere she went, she carried a small reminder in her wallet, the appointment card Sandra had once thrown away without a glance. Proof that recognition doesn't require permission, only the courage to demand it. 3 months later, the Pinecrest West branch stood as a symbol of rebirth, not just in appearance, but in philosophy, spirit, and leadership. Now bearing the name Unity Bank, a division of Parker Financial, the branch had become a haven where respect and representation weren't simply promised, but practiced every day. The sun shone brightly the morning of the grand reopening. A crowd gathered outside, a mixture of media professionals, local community members, non-profit leaders, and curious bystanders, many of whom remembered the viral video that changed everything. A brand new mural adorned the outer wall of the bank, stretching nearly 20 feet long and 10 feet high, featuring bold, dynamic portraits of civil rights leaders Rosa Parks, Maya Angelou, and Shirley Chisholm. Their expressions were painted to exude determination, compassion, and vision. Their eyes seemed to follow onlookers, urging them forward into a new era. The mural was commissioned by Danielle Parker herself and painted by a young and coming artist from the neighborhood named Malik Thompson, whose own mother had once been denied a small business loan from this very branch. Danielle stood at the edge of the red carpet, laid across the sidewalk, her tailored white suit glowing under the morning light. She was joined by Malik, Vanessa, Talia, and a group of new employees, all of whom had contributed in some meaningful way to the transformation of the branch. Unlike traditional ceremonies, there were no suits from corporate headquarters, no empty formalities. This was a community event. Food trucks parked at the curb handed out free meals. A gospel choir performed from the steps of the neighboring bookstore. Kids waved miniature flags bearing the Unity Bank logo. A phoenix rising from a circle of diverse hands, a young reporter from the city's independent paper approached Danielle, recorder in hand. "Miss Parker," she said, adjusting her oversized glasses, "why did you choose those 3 women for the mural?" Danielle turned slightly to admire the artwork. Because they each understood the power of being seen. Rosa Parks wasn't just tired, she was tired of being invisible. Maya Angelou taught us the power of voice. And Shirley Chisholm, she kicked down doors that weren't even supposed to exist for people like her. This bank now stands on that same principle. We see people. We hear them. We open doors. The reporter, clearly moved, followed up. "And what made you take such a strong stand that day, when you dismissed the entire branch team?" Danielle gave a soft smile. "I wasn't angry because they didn't recognize me. I was disappointed because they didn't recognize humanity. That's what we changed. And we're just getting started." She turned toward the crowd. Talia handed her a pair of golden scissors. The ribbon stretched across the doors like a boundary between past and future. Danielle lifted the scissors and with a single decisive snip, cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in cheers. Inside the newly renovated Unity Bank, warm lighting bathed the open floor plan. Gone were the cold, metallic partitions and intimidating high counters. In their place were communal desks, consultation rooms filled with artwork from local schools, and shelves of free educational materials about credit, budgeting, and first-time homeownership. At the front desk stood Jordan, a transgender Indigenous woman and one of the newest hires. She wore a Unity Bank badge with pride and greeted each new customer like an old friend. An elderly man walked in first, his work boots leaving faint impressions on the carpet, and Jordan welcomed him with a smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" The man looked around, clearly surprised by the warmth of the place. "I, just came to cash a check. Didn't know y'all were back open." Jordan nodded. "We are, and we're glad you're here." One by one, people came. A young mother looking to open her child's first savings account. A Nigerian immigrant applying for a small business loan to expand his catering company. A recently widowed woman seeking financial advice for the first time in her life. Each one received not just service, but dignity. Danielle made her rounds quietly. She sat in on meetings, watched interactions, and offered words of encouragement. At one point, she stopped by Malik's station. He was opening a checking account for a high school senior who'd just gotten his first job at the local grocery store. The teenager looked up and did a double take. "Wait, you're that lady from the video, right?" Danielle chuckled. "Guilty. You fired the whole bank. That was badass." Malik laughed. "She also hired me." The teen smiled. "Cool. Maybe I'll work here one day too." Danielle winked. In the months that followed, Unity Bank didn't just become profitable. It became essential. Local nonprofits partnered with the branch to host free financial literacy workshops. Youth mentorship programs used its space on weekends. Seniors were offered technology classes to help manage online banking. The bank's new slogan, etched into the glass door, read, "Not just your bank, your future." National outlets picked up the story again, this time highlighting the long-term impact. Forbes wrote an op-ed titled, "The Parker Way: How One CEO Reimagined Banking from the Inside Out." Harvard Business Review invited Danielle to keynote their ethics summit, but her favorite moment wasn't on a stage or in print. It was an unassuming Wednesday afternoon when a woman in her 60s came in with her grown son. She clutched an old letter in her hand. One she'd received from the bank 10 years ago, denying her a mortgage loan despite good credit. She walked up to the front desk and asked to speak with the manager. Talia met her with grace. "This isn't a complaint," the woman said. "I just wanted to see the place again. I heard it changed. I didn't think I'd live to see it." Talia offered her a seat and something to drink. They talked for nearly an hour. At the end of the conversation, the woman looked around and said, "I never thought a bank could make me feel safe. But this place does." When Talia shared the story later that evening, Danielle nodded but said little. Instead, she walked into her office, looked out the window at the mural, and exhaled slowly. Change didn't come easy. It didn't come fast, but when it arrived, it could be felt in the most human of ways. From then on, Unity Bank became more than just a story. It became a movement. Branches in other cities began pilot programs based on Danielle's model. Corporate executives across industries studied her playbook, and young professionals, especially women of color, began to see in Danielle not just a leader, but a lighthouse. And every time she visited Unity Bank, Danielle made it a point to sit in the lobby for a few minutes, not as the CEO, but as a customer. She listened. She watched. And once in a while, when no one was looking, she'd run her fingers along the edge of the mural, as if drawing strength from those who came before her. Because for Danielle Parker, change wasn't an event. It was a promise, and it was just getting started.